All right. Good afternoon, everyone out there. James Donaldson, Standing Above the Crowd podcast, brought to you on Rainier Avenue Radio, right here in beautiful downtown Seattle. Every Thursday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time is the live version, and you can find it and stream it in all the different streaming apparatuses out there, or you can download it from YouTube in a little bit after we're all done with this. And it'd be a great thing to have and keep with you. We've done a series of podcasts throughout the summer. I think this is my 15th or 16th episode now. We keep on going. We have great guests every single week, and it's just such a pleasure to be here. I got a little housekeeping thing to do with a quick announcement here. Let me read this off before we get started. The Washington 3A District Football Playoffs are live tomorrow night as top seed O'Day host 32nd seeded Snohomish live on Rainier Avenue Radio tomorrow at 7 p.m. All right, so be sure to check into that and have a good time with that. We have some great football during this time of year, followed up by some great basketball later in the year. So stick with our Seattle sports. That's always a good thing. My guest today is a guy who I've known for, 40 plus years, I guess. He was actually the general manager with the San Diego Clippers when I joined that team down there in 1983-84 season. And then he had a career in the NBA as an executive, general manager, and those kind of duties for about 4 decades. The guy I'm speaking about today is Pete Babcock, and I'd like to bring Pete on board here and introduce him and have him tell a great story about some of the work he's doing lately. He just wrote a book, and he'll get into that as well. Is Pete with us today yet? There's my man, Pete. Hey, all right, Pete. Good to see you, man.
How are you?
I'm doing just great, And first of all, I want to say thanks for being there throughout all these decades through my life, and especially the last 10, 15 years or so when I've had some challenges. You've always been right there. You've been such a great guy.
My pleasure. You're one of the all-time good guys in the NBA, James. So I always appreciated you.
Thank you. We'll get to some NBA stuff in a little bit, but you've got a new book out called The Courts of Justice, and I didn't know you were such a civil rights activist throughout all of this, and that's great to know and great to hear. The Courts of Justice, there's Pete's book right there, and it seems like a real exciting read. I read through the website and read some of the excerpts and things on it, and some of the great folks that you've had contribute to this. So why don't you tell us a little bit first about the book, and then a little bit about your involvement with the civil rights and things back in the day.
Okay. Well, the book, I wrote the book. The genesis of the book was to write really my memoirs, and my 2 daughters had encouraged me to put it all in writing for their kids. So we have 4 grandkids. So I could chronicle my experiences, my life experiences, and my life in general for our grandkids. So that's how it started. And then I got to be really good friends with Red Auerbach's biographer, a guy named Ken Dooley, who's 93 years old now and still writes every day, sharp as can be. And he said, hey, could I read it? So I said, sure. So I sent it to him. He read it. He called me. He said, no. You got to do something more with it than just for your kids and your grandkids. And I'll take you through the process, because he's published like 45, 46 books and written plays and screenplays and all kinds of things. So very experienced. So anyway, and we're very close friends with Red. So he was the driving force behind me putting the book together and finishing it. And we took it from being just my memoirs and a story of kind of my life and how it evolved and how I got involved in the civil rights movement and why it became important to me as I grew up. And then we expanded it to the history of Black basketball leading up to the integration of the NBA. And we timed the release of the book for this fall because it's the 75th anniversary of the integration of the NBA. And then being with Ken, my friend Ken Dooley, being such close friends with Red, he had all kinds of stories that Red had given him. Because he had asked Red one time, he says, how did you make the decision to draft the first African-American player in the NBA? And so Red said, I'll tell you the backstory, but I'm going to give it all to you, tell it to you. You can never print it until I'm gone. Once I'm gone, do what you want. He said, because Red said, I don't want credit for any of this. I don't want any credit. I don't want any attention. Once I'm gone, do what you want with it. Well, Red passed away, and Ken never published it. So once I started doing this book, he said, listen, I'm going to give you all those stories. They've never been printed before. The behind the scenes stories about how Red got involved. And so when you get into the book, you'll find out that when Red was a 16-year-old high school player in New York, he had read about this famous all-black team called the New York Renaissance.
Yes.
They were coached by a man named Robert Douglas. He was the owner and coach of the team, and they were known as being the most dominant team in America at the time. People like John Wooden played against them years ago, and John Wooden, years later, when Coach Wooden was at UCLA, he was asked one time, like, who's the best team you've ever seen, ever? And he said, the New York Renaissance. They were the most disciplined. They were the most talented. They were the best coach team of any team I ever saw in my whole life, my whole career. It was pretty big praise coming from Coach Wooden. So Red had heard about this team. He buys a ticket on the train, goes to Harlem by himself, goes to the Harlem Renaissance Ballroom where they played their home games, bought a ticket. He's the only white person in the stands, 16 years old, and Bobby Douglas coaching the game. You can see him sitting in the stands because he's the only white guy there, right? And he's a young kid, and he sees him taking notes, during the game. So after the game, Red managed to get into the locker room and introduce himself to Coach Douglas. Okay. And he says, Coach, I'd like to ask you some questions about strategy, if you don't mind. He says, sure. He said, well, the first half you're blowing that team out and you're playing man-to-man defense. The second half you changed to a zone defense, and they came back and made it close. Why didn't you go back to your man-to-man defense? And Red said some of the players were saying, no, get this white kid out of our locker room. Why is he questioning our coach? And he said, Bobby Douglas said, no, I want to answer his question so he understands. So Bobby Douglas tells Red, you see all these players sitting here? I have contracts with every one of them. I have to pay them. You know how I pay them? Is we sell tickets. You've noticed that the stands were full, okay? That will pay these guys salaries, right? Now, if we blow that team out by 30, some of those fans aren't coming back because it's just not much fun to watch. Big blowout. He said, so we have to have fans coming back. The other thing is, he said, we make our own schedule, and it's hard to find teams that will play us. I want that team to come back and play us again. If we beat them by 30, they're not coming back. We beat them by 10 or 5. They're going to think, maybe next time we could beat the Wrens. And he said, they're not going to beat us. That's not going to happen. But they have to believe they might be able to. So he and Red developed this relationship when Red's only 16 years old, and it went on through Red's adult life. And Bobby Douglas helped him get a coaching job, helped him get a college scholarship, his coaching jobs, even as far as the Celtics. It's all detailed in the book. And then the Chuck Cooper part. This is kind of a long-winded answer, James, but Chuck Cooper part is that Chuck Cooper and Sweetwater Clifton were playing for the Globetrotters. Yeah. Abe Saperstein was the owner of the Globetrotters and coached them. And that was the only place for black players to go and play at a high level was the Globetrotters at that time. So Abe Saperstein had a deal with all the NBA owners. I will come play double headers in your arenas as long as you don't touch my players. Leave my players alone. Now, the NBA was slow to catch on in the beginning, and they needed the Globetrotters to come play double headers because that sold more tickets. So most NBA owners were kind of intimidated by Saperstein, but two players, Chuck Cooper and Sweetwater Clifton, were both college guys. They were bright, well-educated, and they had figured out how much Abe was making every game by basically counting how many people were in attendance. They knew how much tickets were.
Yeah.
So they knew how much Abe was making. They knew how little they were making. And Abe was staying in the best hotel in town while they stayed across the tracks in a terrible place or slept on the bus. Well, they were campaigning with Abe for better contracts and better pay and better living conditions on the road. So Saperstein wanted to get rid of those two guys because they were like, to him, they were clubhouse lawyers.
Yeah.
He told Bobby Douglas. Bobby Douglas told Red, those are two players you can have if you want. And so Red drafted Chuck Cooper.
Is that right?
And he signed Sweetwater Clifton to a contract right after the draft because his attorney told him that Sweetwater was technically a free agent. Abe Podoloff, who was the commissioner of the NBA, disapproved the contract with Sweetwater and the Celtics. The theory is he didn't want two black players on the same team. He sent Sweetwater to New York, and Sweetwater signed with New York a month later. But anyway, all that's in the book, and it tells you about all the stuff that happened leading up to it, and how the game went from the black leagues with churches and YMCA's and social organizations, social clubs, to expanding to a point where it brought blacks and whites together. It helped integration, it helped break down barriers of the ignorance of prejudice and discrimination, because now players were getting to know one another and respect one another. And the whole game, so the whole first half of the book tells that story, how it evolved. And then the second half is kind of my story, my experiences, and how I got involved with the civil rights movement.
That's fascinating. Wow. And of course, I know Kareem has written books about the Harlem Rents in the past.
Right.
He's written about that. Lenny Wilkins has spoken. As a matter of fact, I spoke to Lenny today.
Oh, great.
He told me to tell you hi.
Lenny's terrific. He's the best.
Yeah, Lenny has set me down many, many times over the years and given me great stories about the early origins and beginnings of NBA basketball. Yeah. And especially how it was for black players traveling down in the South.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. A lot of great stories.
Lenny and I spent 7 years together with Hawks, and I probably learned more from him than anybody else I worked with at that time. I mean, he was just a great source and such a gentleman and good person.
Great. Your guy Ken Dooley did now when he shared these stories about Red Auerbach with you, did he have them written down or did he recite them by memory?
No, he had them all written. He had all his notes and everything, and he gave me the stories. He sent them to me. He said, "You can use them in your book." And I said, "Well, I have to give you credit for them." He said, "No, I don't want my name mentioned. I don't want any credit for it." Just kind of like Red didn't want credit, but the stories are in the book and they come from Ken Dooley, even though it doesn't say so in the book.
Fascinating. Wow. And the NBA has come so far in these, years that we've been involved, of course, and the early beginnings of it all. What do you think of the state of the NBA nowadays? This is 2025 and a good, 60 years or so past the civil rights era.
Yeah, I think there's, it's obviously become a huge business, just an enormous business, bigger than I think I ever imagined it might become, this multi-billion-dollar business. The athletes are phenomenal athletes. I won't say downside, but one of the things that I worry about is and the one reason I wanted to do this book is I wanted to help educate today's players about those that came before them, and tell the story about these guys and, leading up to the NBA and then the early days of the NBA and what they went through. I think that's one of the things that's missing today with the league is I wish there was a major emphasis by the league to help educate the players and expose them to the history of the league. And because so many times you'll mention, players from the past. And here's a good example. Short term, when Lenny was assistant coach with the Olympic team, Lenny may have told you this, and Shaq was on the team, and Shaq asked Lenny, Did you ever play this game?
That's right.
What? It's like, he's a Hall of Fame player. He's a many-time All-Star. I mean, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Shaq told his dad that. His dad made Shaq come back and apologize. They may have told you that before, but it's like, but that's that's not Shaq's fault. He just didn't know,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and so anything that we can do that can help educate today's players and coaches about those who paved the way, I think it's important to do.
Yes, and personally, I wish the NBA would allow more of a closer relationship between the RPA, the NBA Retired Players Association, and the NBA. I mean, all of us older guys are sitting by, and we could definitely be tutors and mentors and role models to a lot of these younger guys who have no idea who we are.
Yeah, and you're right. And if I could go back and work again as a GM, I would have an alumni association.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have somebody working full time for our team, and that was their job. And that would be to bring every single player who wanted to come back and be part of what we were doing, even if it was only to have them at attendance at games and mingling with season ticket holders, but be around the players and share stories with the players. And I used to have, when I was working as a GM, I always have people come in and speak to our team, and and Wayne Embry would come in and speak because he and I've been friends for years, and he was kind of one of my mentors. And John Wooden would speak to our team whenever we were on the West Coast. Fat Lever came in, Alex Ingles came in, a number of guys. Casey Jones came in and spent time with us. It's just important I thought it was important that today's players, or back in those days, what I would call today's players, would understand who Casey Jones was and who Fat Lever was, and that's right. Alex English.
Yeah. Well, that's my wish. If we can ever bring all of that together and make that happen for these current players, that'd be fantastic. Now, you said you were active during the civil rights era back in the 60s. You're not that old, are you? Wait a minute.
Well, I'm 76, so
no.
I was a student. I was a student during the civil rights movement. So what was happening was, here's how it happened. Here's how I got involved. I'm watching TV every night, watching the news, like a lot of people did, the national news, and I'm watching the sit-ins. I'm watching the freedom riders, being attacked, and they're not fighting back. They're being completely nonviolent.
Oh yeah.
And people like John Lewis, who I had this great admiration for him, and then fortunately for me, the 13 years I was in Atlanta, we got to be friends, and we worked together in a number of projects, and so which was great for me. It was just a wonderful experience. But I watched these TV news broadcasts every night, and I got more and more concerned, wrapped up in it. Like I don't understand why. Well, how is this happening? How is this possibly happening in our country? How are we treating people like this who aren't being violent? They're not fighting back. They're sitting there taking it. Then when I got into college, I was in Arizona State, and I became a board member for the Phoenix Urban League. Okay. And one of the other board members was Jesse Owens.
Oh.
I got to work with Jesse for 10 years, and with working with Jesse, and the director was Junius Bowman, a longtime civil rights activist. I was learning from them, and it just inspired me to study it more. I was when I graduated from college, I taught American history in high school, and I started studying Black history seriously, and I introduced Black history as a part of American history at an all-white high school where I was teaching. Not all white, but pretty much all white high school in Phoenix, and it was all well received. I didn't have any negative feedback. Jesse Owens would come to my classes and speak to the students. I got more and more interested, and the more I read and studied, the more it captured my imagination, I guess.
Wow.
And then we started using the game as a vehicle. When I got into the NBA, particularly in Denver and Atlanta, we used the game as a vehicle to reach underserved communities, and we started anti-gang programs in Denver. Um, we had a terrible gang problem in Denver. It was they were all transplants from LA. LA authorities were giving the worst gang members one-way bus tickets to Denver
Oh
and
no.
dump them in Denver. So we felt this really big problem. So I remember thinking to myself, what could we do to help? So I went into the gang neighborhoods in the daytime and started walking around and talking to people and asking, is there anybody here who has the respect of all the different gangs? Because it's not just the Bloods and the Crips. There's subsets of the Bloods, subsets of the Crips, and they all fight one another. So it's like everybody's going all these different directions. And they said, yeah, there's a ex-con. His name is Leon Kelly, and everybody calls him Reverend Kelly. And he's dedicated his life to trying to stop violence with young people. So I said, can somebody introduce me to him? So somebody took me to meet him. I meet him. I said, Leon, what do you do? And he said, well, every night I walk the streets every night. And if something's going to break out somewhere, some fight's going to break out, somebody tries to get a message to me, I sprint to that area and try to diffuse it. So I said, let me ask you a crazy question. Could I walk with you at night? And he said, are you sure you want to do this? I said, yeah, I'm with you, so I feel somewhat safe if I'm with you. But we did. And what was interesting was, they see this white guy coming into their neighborhood at nighttime, and there was like a wall up with these young people until Leon said, hey, he's the general manager of the Denver Nuggets. The wall went down, and in the game of basketball, all of a sudden it was like, oh, you are? Hey, tell us about Alex English. Tell us about Calvin Knapp, Fat Lever. What are they like? So now I walk with him one night a week. It was for a period of time. And then I said, okay, Leon, here's my next idea. I want you to bring 2 opposing gang members to a game and sit with me behind our bench.
Wow.
Okay. And I want to bring them, and we'll have dinner in the Arena Club, which is like a private club we had. We'll treat them to dinner, spend time in my office. We'll go to the locker room, meet all the players before the game, and then sit with me during the games. And I want them to experience another side of life. And we're trying to break down these barriers and bring these kids together. And we had successes and we had failures. But some of the successes were there were season ticket holders that sat around me who got to know some of these kids and actually offered them jobs working for their companies. So anyway, we've tried to use the vehicle of the game to reach different communities, the underserved communities, and that's all detailed in the book. And then it gets into the work with John Lewis and different programs we did, and so.
Yeah, and that's one great thing about sports. It has a way of just bringing people together,
Exactly.
different backgrounds and cultures and ethnicities, everything. It all comes together with sports being that main common denominator. It's so fantastic. Yeah.
You know the story, but in the book I have one chapter on the famous story about Maurice Stokes and Jack Twyman. So you got Maurice Stokes, a black player, Jack Twyman, a white player, both young guys, star players for the Cincinnati Royals. Yeah. Stokes gets hurt badly and is permanently he's paralyzed. Yes. And Jack Twyman, a 23-year-old bachelor, white guy, takes him in as his official guardian.
Wow.
Takes care of Maurice Stokes for the last 11 or 12 years of his life.
Yeah, fantastic.
Takes care of him. And the game that brought these 2 guys together in totally different backgrounds, who became the closest of friends, to the extent that, Jack Twyman, here's this young professional athlete who's a bachelor, now devote his life to taking care of Mo Stokes, and he did.
Yes.
And there's so many stories like that,
Yeah,
where the game brings people together and breaks
it
down
does.
barriers.
It really does, and it's done that for me throughout my life. I mean, I have
Yeah,
some of my deepest and longest lasting relationships through sports. I mean, with you and Lenny and Don
yeah,
Casey and so many others.
yeah,
We're all getting up there in years now, but hey, the
right,
friendships endure
yeah,
throughout those decades. The memories endure. Uh, and that's another thing about today's young people is they don't really understand a lot of what the movements were to get them to this point. Not only do basketball players not only understand the beginnings of NBA basketball, but they don't know much about the civil rights era. They don't know much about the
right,
people who paved the way. Our schools are not doing a good job. Of course, this administration is not doing a good job of allowing that
right,
to happen.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we older folks have to keep on reaching back and paving the way and showing the way that we can.
Absolutely. There's so many things. I mean, there's a great book that's out. It's been out for a number of years called The Secret Game, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was at the Duke Medical School versus John McClendon's team at the
Yes.
At that time was called North Carolina College for Negroes,
Oh
um,
wow.
and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but John McClendon was one of the best coaches ever, and
Wow.
he was 28-year-old head coach at this all black school, and
Okay.
had a really good team. And the Duke Medical School, this was 1944, we're in the midst of World War II. The Duke Medical School was recruiting graduating athletes from around the country to
Yeah.
come and go to medical school to become doctors and medics, uh, for the war effort. Well,
Mm.
medical schools formed their own basketball team.
Okay.
They were really good. And in fact, the
Mm.
Duke University's varsity team won their conference championship. The medical school beat them almost every time they scrimmaged them.
Wow.
So
Great
there was a
story.
YMCA. You got time? We got time or not?
No, I just got the times up from the producer,
Oh,
but we can wrap up.
all
But
right.
hey, Pete, this has been fantastic. Great dialogue, great conversation. And it adds another chapter into the book that I know about Pete Babcock. I had no idea all this involvement. And hey, it's just a treasure. I'm glad you wrote your story. I'm glad you put it down in paperback. People go out and get a copy of this great book, Courts of Justice by Pete Babcock. This is James Donaldson signing off. We'll see you again next week. Have a great day now.